Morning, Ryan. I know it's early there, so thank you for jumping on the pod with us today. It's funny, actually. I was talking to Greg Potter the other day, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and you came up in conversation how you know Tim Gray and how Greg does as well. And it just struck me how sort of small this sort of community is, and that everybody seems to sort of know everybody at the end of the day. Of course, this isn't about Tim or Greg, although we did do a pretty decent episode with Greg a couple months back on sleep. I know, a bit of a shameless plug, but it was a great conversation. He definitely knows what he's talking about. Back to you, though. So I like stories and learning about how people ended up where they are now. And I know you've got one to share, and I'd love it if we could learn little more about you and how you ended up in the health coaching space.
I mean, there's a trend there where typically practitioners, nutritionists, dietitians, nutritional coaches, even personal trainers, I would say, they all have, in my opinion, maybe like 90% of them have a story where they lost their health, so to speak. And again, there's a theme. And you might be listening to this and thinking you're struggling with your health. Well, you're not alone. I've been there. I've been there many years ago. Again, like precisely maybe, 12, 15 years ago. And again, I didn't even know anything about health. I didn't know what health was. I just thought it was just second nature. It was there. Didn't think much about it. But that changed when I lost it, essentially. And I noticed certain things like my libido, muscle mass, energy, feeling drunk, all these kind of issues popping up, and going to my standard doctor, tried a few things, took some antibiotics, nothing really worked, and just like scratching my head and like, what's going on here? So I was forced to do this myself, basically, to become my own doctor and read, unlearn, relearn. And just basically the passion grew immensely. I really hated books growing up, but I'm a big fan of reading so much nowadays. Unfortunately, I would like that time to be even more, but my young daughter, with all her energy and needs and attention, she puts that to bed quite a lot. But essentially, I'd have health issues without even realizing it. They probably dragged on for 20 years. I took everything for granted. But my own story before the health, I was just like lost essentially in life. I was selling things I shouldn't be selling. I didn't really have a clear path. I didn't go to the university route. I sort of just had a part-time job. I was working with my dad on the side. Actually, that dad story, the dad part of the story, I was working in an old antique shop, and the basement had a severe amount of mould. I also moved out of my family home and lived independently with my girlfriend at the time. And I'm pretty sure that several of the places that we rented in London, they had mould as well. So that was a big kicker. Now, for me as a clinician, mould is a problem. Mycotoxins, mould, they're two different things. We group them as one, but it's a big problem. It's a big problem in our modern world, in the way that we live right now, always essentially being indoors. And it was another thing to add to everything else, basically, of not looking after my health, of not doing basically the MOT, looking after myself, checking things. And it basically hit me for six, alongside trying to bulk up and regain a lot of the lean body mass that I basically destroyed when I was just becoming like an exercise addict, essentially. And I started going crazy for bluefin tuna, obviously the good stuff, and was like, I don't know, I think I was probably consuming maybe 2 to 3, no, maybe not 3 kilos, but 2 kilos of bluefin tuna every single week, raw. And yeah, I don't think tuna is a big problem as everyone makes it out to be. But in the setting of what we discussed previously, the cell danger response and poor health, it can be a problem when your body can't deal with the mercury as such. And everything like your digestive system, your liver, kidneys, they can't really pick up the slack. There's not a charge in your, there's no battery. So it's basically you're a sitting duck, and then you become a sitting duck for other things, other toxins. And you're basically just drowning. So that forced me to look elsewhere for solutions. I came across certain nutritionists. I really enjoyed their sort of way of thinking, their approach, realizing, again, I need to do basic things like become more anabolic with eating more protein, nutrient density. And I was like, wow, this is really an interesting career at this point in time. I also was at a crossroads with, okay, I need to leave my dad's business. This is killing me, basically. And I was like, okay, let's explore this, and I'll see if I can become a nutritionist. So luckily, I was working part-time with my dad and studying part-time for around 5 years. And in this period, I was like sort of sharing my recipes online on social media, and yeah, just started building my account. And then I was making friends in a health circle, like our mutual friend Tim Gray, and he gave me an opportunity to work with his hyperbaric oxygen clinic. So I actually had a foot in, basically, a foot in the door, seeing and working with people even before being qualified as a nutritionist or a nutritional therapist. And that was really eye-opening, and it just basically grew my passion. I made amazing connections. I was in like a private chef for a top 10 tennis player in the world for his training camp. So again, loads of opportunities. And then when I qualified, I had everything basically ready, and boom, that basically allowed me to be doing what I'm doing right now. And also it was sort of met with COVID as well, where everything was becoming shutting down and we were just more remote. And that allowed me, okay, let's actually build a remote business. I didn't need to be in Harley Street renting a clinic anymore. And even I probably wouldn't even do that right now, because again, it goes against my integrity. It goes against my beliefs of being indoors. So again, I fled the UK, I went to Mexico, went to Central America, other countries, came back, had opportunities in the Middle East as well, working with several clients and making new friends there. Just bouncing back and forth between Central America and the UAE, and basically stuck with Nicaragua, which is where I am right now. I have a girlfriend here. I have a baby here. I've got land here. I'm a resident, well, partial resident here, basically. So again, this is where my life is, and I work with clients around the world, and it provides me the freedom and the lifestyle that I crave and thrive for.
That's amazing. And there are just so many parallels there between your story and mine, and just things like mold, etc. It always almost makes me want to throw out the script I put together in a sense and just talk about that. But yeah, no, mold is definitely an issue. And I still find it to this day sort of fascinating that somebody can live in somewhere that is seen to be as first world as, say, somewhere like London, and it is just so prevalent. Um, but yeah, something we can maybe discuss a little later on. Sort of curious about Nicaragua, though. Not that I can even pronounce it, and I'll
You've
be
done well.
honest. Okay, cool, fair. And I had to actually look it up on Google Maps. Embarrassingly, I'm a chemist, not a geographer. So if my father's listening to this, Dad, I apologize. One day I'll learn where something is. Um, but yeah, what do you there exactly? I mean, there are so many guys in this space, your Saladinos and Jack Cruisers, etc., who sort of settle in that. It's not a peninsula. I just call it a corridor in that sort of Central American corridor, Bali, Costa Rica. Yeah, but what made you choose Nicaragua?
Yeah, I mean, what made me stay here was obviously my girlfriend and my daughter. But I think Mexico, I think other countries are just as good. I didn't have the opportunity of exploring Peru, South America, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, all these other countries. So again, I can't say, but it's particularly around Central America where you name those names. There's abundance of light. There's abundance of plants. There's more space, less people. As these are sort of developing countries, maybe not Costa Rica, but they're developing countries, they're much more rural. So they're talking like this is like maybe in the UK, say 80 years ago. This is how it is here. There's times when there's no electricity or no water, basically. It's a very, very different, it is a culture shock to be living here. Now, to go on holiday here is completely different, but to live here is very different. But there's more opportunities here to live closer to nature. It's more economical as well. Again, then you go into things like taxes and all the expenses and stuff like that. But living here, there's no conveniences, basically. And like I said, there's no Amazon. There's no delivery of your food. But again, there's the opportunity to buy fresh fruit, have chickens in your backyard, have a pig, some sheep. There's the opportunities for that, and that's relatively cheap. So is buying land and space here within context. So again, I mean, that's the true appeal of living here. But the volcanoes, the Pacific Ocean, the Caribbean Ocean, which other side you go on, it's close to America as well. I mean, technically speaking, it's only like 10 to 11 hours on a plane to the UK or to Madrid, essentially, from where I am. So it's not too far. Again, if you think most UK people head to sort of Dubai, and that's at least, I think it's like 6 hours, that flight. So we're talking 11 hours to have completely different culture shock and more natural and raw than what the Middle East can offer, essentially, which is, again, has some perks, but again, it's very artificial in a sense.
Yeah, again, more parallels. I grew up in South Africa for the most part, and yeah, sort of lack of electricity, lack of water. It was just par for the course. It doesn't matter if you're middle class, bottom of the pecking order, or just ultra wealthy. It's sort of the electric goes off, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I mean,
So
nowadays you can get solar panels, you can build a well, you become more decentralized, essentially. And that's maybe that was the whole point about it. It's more of a decentralized living where you become more independent. You're not looking from handouts from the government or doing what they say per se. You are actually, like I said from the start, you're your own doctor, you're your own landowner, you're your own sort of supplier of everything that you truly need. And then you can just build your community, your friends. Maybe you've got a friend who sells fruits and vegetables. And again, I've got one. She's the godmother of my daughter. So she sells me my fruit and vegetables. I've got a friend who's the butcher. Again, you build, and then my girlfriend's brother-in-law is a fishmonger. So again, it's just like, this is just a small community that I've built where they look after me. I'm happy to pay them. And again, it's just a mutual exchange, essentially.
yeah, no, it does sound pretty idyllic, and yeah. South Africa is definitely not that. But a conversation for another day, maybe. But yeah, no, it's. I know it's not doable for everyone, but I definitely think it helps just from a health perspective. Obviously, living in an environment like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was moving and traveling when I was free, single, no kids, less responsibilities. So again, I completely get that. I'm not ignorant of some people who have got jobs, financial restraints, maybe health issues. They can't just pick up and go. So again, I'm definitely very aware of that. But again, there is, if you're really unhappy, if you're literally staring at the wall, thinking the worst, what have you got to lose? If you think, is it really getting better in the country where you live? Can you see there's going to be hope? Or again, you're just sitting on a sinking ship where taxes are rising, the identity of the country's going, basically. You can't even share your opinions of things. Again, why would you want to stay in that? So again, what you need to do is maybe not just jump ship straight away, but again, put a plan in place. Maybe it takes 1 year, maybe it takes 3-4 years. But again, just plant the seed, essentially.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of novelty to it as well. You can grow out of any environment, can't you, at the end of the day? And and when you get to that point, it's essentially a form of burnout, I think.
Well,
But
yeah,
if
I
you,
mean, I would say it reflects your mitochondria. So if you're
yeah,
stuck, so again, this is the cell danger response. Like if you're stuck and you've got no energy in your cell, in mitochondria, and you're frozen as such, and your membranes all tangled and rigid, again, you're not really going to be making good choices for the future. Essentially, you're just going to be day to day, essentially, just getting over the day. So again, I definitely see that, and it's harder for some people mentally, physically, to be doing or thinking about this. So again, I'd propose this idea to my dad. Dad, what are you doing in the UK? Come out here for 3 months, live here, check it out. No, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. Because again, he's stuck in his way. He's so like jumbled in his way of thinking, but it's like a burnout for him to even think of the possibility of the idea of that, basically. So it's an interesting thing when you propose ideas to people and you can watch their reaction. It actually shares a lot about their health.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, I agree completely. But it's a case of it's a excuse me. It's a case of better the devil you know. I suppose. And it's easier to sort of exist even if it's uncomfortable in an environment that is safe in the sense it is familiar. And I
Yeah,
think and that familiarity can be toxic and can be poisonous, and you can go down any rabbit hole with that you'd like to, obviously relationships, etc. But beliefs, it's a known variable, and that provides an element of security. And I think that's what people are ultimately after at the end of the day, is security, even if it's uncomfortable. And yeah, I can definitely, again, attest to that, having sort of moved out of SA pretty quickly and on a bit of a whim. And it sort of, yeah, got to the UK, and it's been up and down. But I think for the most part, what I'm trying to say is you never realize sort of what you're capable of until you just do it, and you don't overthink it as well, which I think is also important. You can definitely plan these things out, but occasionally you've just also got to take a leap of faith and just sort of be willing to accept the fact that maybe the grass can be greener on the other side. And it's not necessarily always the case, I think, but again, I just come back to this novelty, and yeah, we can discuss this from a CDR perspective as well. But I think, yeah, that just provides at least the illusion of change, even if nothing has changed. And this is getting very philosophical, so maybe we should get back on track. But yeah, that's a nice little tangent and good way to start the conversation. So thank you. Um, so this idea of integrating modern science with ancestral wisdom, I think it's become a bit of a catch-all term, in the sense, and I think maybe it's just my or my viewpoint of it, but a lot of people sort of view it as sort of just eating meat and fruit and standing in the sunshine 5 hours a day, and then maybe slapping your biohacking gizmos and gadgets on yourself at the end of the day. But there's obviously a lot more to it than that, especially when looking at it through the lens as a nutritional therapist. I mean, and then helping people deal with chronic health issues. So, can you break down what this idea means to you, and then why you maybe feel it's a decent starting point to work with people, if that makes sense?
for sure. I mean, there's always levels of where you're coming from or where you're at, basically. So the application, which is always missing, the context, the nuance, always missing in most information, social media, podcasts out there. So that's really going to determine what's really relative for you and actionable. But for most people, the majority who are consuming a standard, say, UK or Western diet, lifestyle, if you want to call it that as well, again, that is going to be reaping the rewards, essentially. Um, Again, you could probably lump animal foods and plant foods, just avoiding the hyperpalatable foods, which, yeah, I mean, you can argue and you can go down in rabbit holes. Is it addictive? Does it is it all that kind of stuff addictive? I don't think it really matters. But again, you eating real foods, you embracing more sunlight, and of course we can obviously go into details of that, what specifics, what amount, what time of the day, doing what, wearing clothes, blah blah blah. That is going to be, again, a jump start, essentially. But what are you actually trying to do with this? Well, again, with food, essentially, it's not about calories, ironically. It does support us with energy, but it's about electrons. It's about the energy in the food and the information inside the food as well. So we should see food as a barcode. And when you eat junk human-derived foods, that barcode is scrambled for your biology or for your mitochondria to essentially assimilate and know what it is, basically. So it's a bit like putting the wrong fuel in your car, essentially, or putting the oil where you put the oil in like your motorbike in the gas tank, essentially, for the petrol. So you're mixing up, essentially, messing up the true signal of what we use food for. The light essentially is supporting many things, but from the first principles, it's supporting circadian biology, and nothing can happen without that. There's light before there is food, essentially, because the food chain or the food web is based on light and obviously like water and the gases inside our atmosphere, which is, again, a mixture of many things, but plants use oxygen. Plants use carbon dioxide and we use oxygen. We reverse that. We're bidirectional to them. But essentially, the sunlight is supporting your circadian biology, and it's a bit like turning the engine on with the car keys, essentially. It's the ignition that turns on everything. And we're talking fundamentals of your biology. We're talking about heme and how iron works. And that basically sets the tone of how you shuttle the food or your body fat or your glycogen into your mitochondria and make, aka ATP, energy. And again, it's nothing about calories, because again, there's no calories in the food. They have basically sort of like macronutrients, but within that, there's electrons and protons, basically. That's what our mitochondria fundamentally uses. And there's more electrons in certain foods and there's less electrons in other foods. The irony here is we don't really measure it in that way. We measure it in basically the caloric way of how much heat does it basically, or how much does it heat? How much does it combust heat, essentially? And again, there is some application of that. I'm not just trying to throw it underneath the bus. We can use it to some value, to some degree, but it shouldn't be a yardstick of how healthy we are or the quality of the food, or, I need 2,000 calories per day, so therefore I can eat jelly beans and stuff like that. That's sort of like a piss poor viewpoint of health, in my opinion.
It's very reductionistic.
But again, I mean, like I said, it does have some value per se, but it's not the true essence of our biology. It's a bit more advanced. And unfortunately, like, science has sort of stopped basically with that, and not really expanding upon, okay, when I'm talking about the electron density of the food, or actually measuring the light spectrum that releases when basically we utilize it, or even how the microbiome basically release biophotons. They release light essentially when they're basically breaking down food as well. So we have all that kind of understanding, but again, it's just missing. But in my field, in my specialty of nutritional therapy, I can discuss that with clients. I can say, this is what we know. This is a bit in the gray, like, this is kind of gray, murky waters. This is what's worked with some of my clients in my approach. Let's obviously use an evidence-based approach, but have an understanding that this is all there, it's real, and just explore it, basically. So it's not kind of wacky and like, okay, I can just survive off air and all I need to do is like get sunlight on my skin. No, we still need food, we still need energy. There's many factors involved in that and how that actually fundamentally works. And it can be complex, but again, it can be very straightforward. Like I said, most people eat more of an animal-based slanted diet, eat seasonal plants, get some light, natural light in the body, remove the artificial light at nighttime. And again, that's your first stepping stones of becoming healthy. Then you can go into sort of the deeper work, okay, supplementation, testing, biohacks, gadgets, gym, training, breathing, exploring possible toxicity issues, dental, microbiome stuff. But again, it can become a slippery slope and you'll never know when really to stop. And you can make yourself sick, essentially. I was probably on the verge of that by knowing too much or exploring and listening to too much information and not stepping back and actually seeing things for what they truly are. And again, the human body is complex, but at the end of the day, it's super simple. It's very simple. We sometimes just need to get out of our way, remove our ego, have faith, and give ourselves time. And in our world, in our modern world, time is very rare because everything's 6 weeks transformational, or let's do this detox in 30 days, or 7-day juice fast, or whatever it is. There's always like a time limitation to truly changing your health. And my approach is slightly a little bit different. I work with clients typically for like 12 months. Some clients I've actually worked for some clients I've worked together for, I think, like 4 or 5 years now, basically. Not like they need day-to-day support, but they want guidance there. They want to know that everything is all right, a bit like the MOT every single year that you can be doing for your car. But again, it takes time to truly build your health. I didn't have great health for a long period of time of when I was trying to improve it. It took me, I'd say, at least 5-6 years of getting there and failing and doing like crazy stuff, basically. And again, I do agree, maybe you need to explore the crazy stuff. Maybe you need to do the wacky bulletproof coffee for a little bit and realize, like, what the hell are you doing? Or, I don't know, become a vegan for, I don't know, a few months and like be like, okay, I feel really unhappy and blah, blah, blah. But again, for some people, it could work because, again, there's context with those things. Maybe the bulletproof diet in a protocol can be useful for someone, or maybe the vegan diet who might live in the tropics in Nicaragua, maybe they can get away with it, as an example, because they actually have the environment for it, opposed to someone in Iceland or in Scotland who no way they should be thinking about becoming a vegan, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a perfect answer. You've already answered my next question. Thank you. Um, just going back quickly, you touched on light a fair few times there. Do you believe in this idea of chronotypes? I'm fairly skeptical about it, I must admit. I think chronotypes are the result of the modern lifestyles that we live. I'm trying to think of the individual who put them together, your dolphins, your lions, etc. I think it's a bit of an evolutionary mismatch, and ultimately, if you remove these, what would you say, these issues that sort of drive up the disruptions in our chronobiology to begin with, that you will ultimately all fall back into this natural pattern of waking up when the sun rises and going to sleep when it sets. Do you believe? What are your thoughts there? Do you think it's
Yeah.
hypothesis works? Or
Well, again, I mean, I read the book by, I think the author's Michael Bruce.
that's right, yeah.
And I read the book many years ago. I think, that was interesting when I read it at the time, and I didn't know sort of Dr. Jack Kruse's approach or understanding. Nowadays, I probably think like 99% of people, it's an environmental or nutritional, metabolic induced theory, essentially. But I would probably say like 1%, maybe 0.5%. Maybe there's something there in exploring some genetics as such, where basically they would have been the watcher at nighttime, looking over the herd, or looking after the people where they wouldn't get invaded or attacked by animals, as an example. So maybe there's some evolutionary genetic or like changes there. But I truly believe like that if you're exploring a lot of genetics, you can find things a bit. You can find, okay, oh, look, there's an association there. But how much does it really stack up with other confounding factors? And how much does that epigenetics truly influence it, basically? But I would say also, like going down a bit further, our sleeping patterns in our modern world are very unique as well. So again, there's a TED talk about our ancestral sleep patterns, looking at a certain, I think it's the the Maasaians in Africa, basically, where their sleep patterns are very distorted, and sometimes they would wake up frequent times at nighttime and wake up for like 5, 10, 30 minutes, then go back to sleep again. I here in Nicaragua, like in the middle of the day, and also that's also the case in Spain, there's siestas, where the middle of the day there's actually like a sleep. And that's sort of lost in our culture, where you don't sleep in the middle of the day anymore. Wild animals here, and likely due to because the intense sunlight, where again they just can't handle the heat because it dehydrates them so much. They just go in the shade, they lay on the tree, and they go to sleep for an hour. And that makes sense because being in the sun all day in the tropics here is intense. It's kind of moronic, to be honest with you, as well. Once you've been living here for like 5 years, it's kind of stupid to be in the sun in the middle of the day. There's literally no need for it, basically. Again, there's a honeymoon period when you go on holiday as well. Oh, sun, like great, let's go all day in the sun. And again, that gets kind of boring after a while. And you realize, wow, I need to be drinking so much water and hydrate and take in more magnesium and minerals. Because again, when you're in the sun, it's a tax as well for your system. But most people don't really understand that. But wild animals, they don't go in the sun. Locals, they don't definitely go in the sun in the middle of the day. They're indoors or they're under shade. Again, I'm building a house right now. His lunch break is always from 12 to 1. And there's no way these guys are in the sun. And even they work on the site, they're darker than I am because they're melanated. They're covered up. They don't want the sun on their skin because it's powerful here, basically. And it depletes them of so many things. But I would also say they probably don't get enough of it at the right times either, in the morning. But I mean, that's just a bit of education and they just don't have that understanding. But the idea is our sleeping windows, what we think is what we should be sleeping from like 9 till say 7 or 6. That's our norm. It should be completely undisturbed. That's classified as gold standard. But again, there's actually some data and some suggestions which maybe it could be broken up. Maybe they actually should be asleep in the middle of the day, and that would actually reduce our requirements a little bit. Again, here I sleep from typically like 8:30 and wake up around 5 o'clock in the morning. It gets dark here, pitch black around 6:30 all year round. And the sun rises here around like 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. There's not much variance in the light stability here. Where you live, the light stability is massive. And that's where you'll see changes within the sleep and archetypes. But again, who knows what we've done in the modern world with electronics, our food. We've hijacked our biology. And when we investigate that and explore that, like who knows what we're looking at. And I would also make the case that's also the case for the microbiome as well. We don't truly know what is a healthy microbiome. Yeah, we know certain foods or probiotics that can move certain species, but what is the relevance of that, basically? So again, that's a whole nother sort of rabbit hole to explore of what are we actually looking at, what we're trying to get at, what does the science or modern science say, what does the ancestral evolution science say, and trying to make up some sort of personal insight to a recommendation, basically. And it can be kind of not complex, but different. And it's always different in certain different people.
Yeah. Just sort of tacking on from that again, do you think sort of taking somebody's sort of genetics and ancestry into account, that should alter potentially where they live? I know that's sort of definitely going down the cruise rabbit hole bit, but I mean, he argues it obviously that from a nutritionist standpoint to an extent, that if you sort of live at a northern latitude, maybe you could get away with sort of not necessarily needing that polyphagic, excuse me, sleep schedule. But do you think my question there being, if you, just in your opinion, of course, if you are sort of natively or ancestrally from a northern latitude and you sort of migrate to something that's more equatorial, as an example, do you think you can adapt just from a mitochondrial standpoint, from a health standpoint, to thrive in that environment, or will your sort of your heritage sort of dictate that maybe you won't necessarily thrive in that environment, even if on paper it seems to tick all the quantum biology boxes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say it's easier for a Northern European ancestral to come down into the tropics opposed to the opposite. And that would be based on our mitochondria and how uncoupling proteins work, which are basically a bit like valves, which release energy as such. So Europeans are typically more loosely uncoupled, basically. Loosely uncoupled, basically. So when we're cold, we basically release energy to keep ourselves warm. And when your haplotypes are more African-based, or even a little bit of the Middle Eastern haplotypes as well, or I'd also say people around here and also in Asia, they don't do well with cold temperatures. They don't have the capacity of that valve of releasing heat or releasing energy to create free heat. So they're at a disadvantage. Here, I would say that we can handle that better. I would actually say it's probably more advantageous for us to be closer to the light. But then also just going what I went into, the sun is also very strong here and you would need to be adapted to it. So as you can see, I'm very tanned. This tan doesn't that tan doesn't really go. Again, if you traveled here and you had a good solar callus, you might get a tan for 2 weeks and then it would basically disappear. I would say because of my time here, this wouldn't really go. This would go eventually, but it would take a long time to go. And I would say my biology has adapted here from living in here for like 4 or 5 years, basically. Maybe it requires more time, basically. But for essentially an African living in like Canada or in the UK, it can be a struggle. We can see that in the Asian population in the UK when they have cardiovascular issues, type 2 diabetes, all those complications, and that's potentially a massive role. Sure, we got the food scenario in the mix there, but the lack of nitric oxide, basically, the lack of UVA light, the modern day living of being indoors, that's obviously all impeding that, basically, and it's basically a big soup, a big mess, essentially, for the metabolism biology. Most people need more light in their life, not less.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just moving from a country like South Africa, where I mean, it's not exactly what it sounds like on the postcard, and there's and there's definitely well where I lived anyway, in sort of the southern Drakensberg, there's the days get pretty short in winter, but there's definitely more light than there was, say, when I came over to the UK, and I definitely struggled. So I mean, obviously I'm of Northern European descent, and just coming back to sort of my home country, I noticed very quickly that the lack of light just had a profound effect on me, and maybe that's an age thing too.
But again, remember, like where you live in the UK, whilst you live in the UK, depends where you live. If you live in Devon, Cornwall, on the coast, it's going to be a step forward. You're slightly still further south, be it by a couple of degrees, but it makes a big difference compared to being in like Middlesbrough, Newcastle,
Northeast, yeah.
in the northeast. And then you have the weather, you have the rain, you got the English Channel basically bearing on you. You don't have the protection of the the African Peninsula pushing up the rain and the clouds and the wind, basically. And then you've got greenery, your local environment. If you're surrounded by concrete, industrial buildings, blah, blah, blah,
Thankfully not.
cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, that's another struggle to contend with and add to the picture of your light environment. Because again, when you're surrounded by nature and greenery, well, you're actually getting a reflection of all the light and it's bouncing and hitting you in your skin, basically.
Saponins, yeah.
Yeah, so that's another layer to the actual mechanism why also living in London, whilst further south, might actually be a more problematic thing because you're just surrounded by concrete. And that is also a limiting factor, essentially.
Yeah, the lure of London was very short-lived, I'll be honest. It was great, and then it sort of died off very quickly. Okay, so to sort of close up on that particular loop, and maybe we could sort of chat a bit more about nutrition. So I think there's this idea that you essentially, well, as we've discovered, it's not only nutrition that sort of drives chronic disease. There are so many other factors, uh, light, community, etc., as we just sort of alluded to. But I think there's this idea that sort of tracks is that you can sort of just reverse your sort of bad lifestyle and your bad eating habits and solve all your health issues. And I think that tracks to a certain extent. It definitely does. But after a certain point, I think a certain amount of dysfunction occurs and you need sort of, extra intervention, extra help. It's a case of, I suppose, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and I've used this before, but and he fell apart. And that was obviously, he fell apart, and then it was a much more difficult sort of endeavor to then put the pieces back together again. And so I think what I'm trying to ask is, that's my sort of take on it. But do you have a different view on it? Do you think we can sort of heal through diet and lifestyle alone, or is that a bit of a romantic notion?
No, I definitely think that it can have a massive change into your outcomes and way of living, but it can't be excluded from everything else. I believe that when you take part in a new diet, you should actually be taking part in a new personality and identity at the same time as well. So that would be like, okay, I'm a person who cares about the food, what they put in their body, and the way I move, the way I breathe, my posture. Everyone checks their posture right now. The light environment, and everything else. You have to actually have that approach if you want better health and better outcomes. It can't just be, yeah, I'm just going to swap a few bad foods out with a few good foods and hope for the best basically. But like I said, it can have some good outcomes, but maybe it does depend on what kind of level or disease or problems that you do have. So if you're in a hospital bed on a ventilator, yeah, maybe eating a bit like a bit liver and a bit of heart and some honey, yeah, maybe that's not really going to be reversing the situation. But nutrition is really more about prevention to a certain degree. But to reverse diseases, that requires more of a grander scheme. Might require moving environment, shifting massively your environment, basically, a more detailed approach to certain things. But even then, it depends. It might be like a bit too late. We might need help of certain medications or modern medicine and science interventions, which again is valid. It's not like us versus them. It should be an integrated approach, basically. Um, and that integrated approach is, again, it's not diet, it's not versus light, it's not this is better than that. It has to be a collective. It's a bit like our biology. Our biology is a holome biome or holome biome, essentially. It's a collection of certain genomes, our microbiome, us, our mitochondria genome, essentially. Our environmental stressors and influences of that, be it the gases that we breathe in and interact with, or the potential mycotoxins, the pollens, everything else. It's all a stimulus. It's not good or bad. It's also going to be the determinant of the host, essentially, and the holome biome of that, essentially. So again, I think that answers your question. But definitely diet has a major role, no doubt. It's the building blocks of us. It's the nitrogen, it's the carbon, it's the hydrogen, it's the building blocks, it's the DNA, it's proteins, the amino acids, and that comes from food. So of course it's important.
But it's maybe not the entirety of the solution when you hit that critical
Yeah,
threshold.
well, I mean, think of it as like an orchestra. It's the instruments, but it's not the player. It's not how the instruments are playing together with the conductor, but it's the raw instruments there. Or again, it's like you got the 11 best football players in the world, the dream team, but without a manager, without a game plan, without them working together, it doesn't really mean good. Maybe looking at Real Madrid, they have all these, what do they call it? I don't know what the word's called, but basically like these superstars, but they don't gel and work together, basically. And it only took like Carlo Ancelotti to come there for work for 5 years, and they started working and playing together and winning titles, basically. But before that, it didn't really work out. That's just like our biology when we have to think about the systems, when we have our gut, when we have our skin, when we have our nervous system, and then we have all these axes around influencing them, and then we got like so many other like crosswires in the mix of them. It's super super delicate, but it's a system base, and again that could be scaled on a small level, and that can be scaled on sort of the organism level as well within the environment.
Yeah, I'll take your word in the football analogies. I barely know how to kick a ball in a straight line. Sort of, I grew up as a cyclist, so two left feet if I'm lucky, and that's that. But yeah, no, I understand. It
Well,
makes
a
perfect
cyclist,
sense.
I don't think cycling is really a team sport, but again, maybe in the Tour de
Yeah,
France, there's a team to help the winner. But again, it's like there's usually a person at the front who's
yeah.
blocking the wind, and then they have the person on the tail, and he's basically cruising and getting the help from the person at the front. Again, that's maybe a little bit like our biology. So again, I would see that it's like our skin and eyes is that person at the front getting smashed with all the light, and maybe our gut comes in the mix of that because they're our sensors to the outside world. They're getting smashed. There's more free radicals in those organs, basically. So the skin, eyes, gut, lungs, they're getting smashed. There's more free radicals. The metabolism is slightly different to other tissues, and they're taking the slack, and they're then deciphering that signal and sending that signal and the energy to other organs who are sort of running the show, basically, such as the brain or the heart. They're at the back being protected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely. No, I definitely, it definitely does. And I think I was just alluding more to the fact that I just generally know nothing about football or any of the individuals you spoke of more than the analogy itself. Um, but yeah, no, thank you for that clarification as well. That's a pretty good sort of segue into talking about seasonal eating, I think. Which I think is important to discuss because, I mean, yeah, we could talk about obviously the lack of diverse diet diversity leading to things like monocolonization in the gut and nutrient deficiencies. Um, but I know it's something you talk about at least a fair amount in your Instagram and in your communications and education. But why is eating seasonally important and sort of moving away from this idea of just eating the same food sort of day in and day out?
So different foods, they're in season based on the light and the water, temperature, and just their general metabolism, basically. So we shouldn't be eating the same things every single day, all year round. Number one, it's very limiting. That's not how nature's designed us to be eating or living or thriving, basically. Just like the sunlight is not the same all year round. So therefore, the food's not going to be the same all year round. But like diving deeper into that, like I said from the start, there's a barcode, and our mitochondria sense that barcode and pick it up and break it down. In all food, there's carbons. That doesn't really change the type of carbon. The hydrogen does, the water. And there's two types of hydrogen that we use in our biology, protium and deuterium. And our mitochondria sense that. They're tiny. We're talking smallest levels here, basically. But the deuterium is sort of a seasonal influence, especially in the UK more so. Here, it's not really much of a seasonal variation, but it has an effect here. But in the UK, it's more dramatic, the seasons of deuterium. And deuterium essentially is more in line with carbohydrates or certain plants, but more in line with summer, certain carbohydrates or sugars. Even like you could argue seed oils and more deuterium in it as well. So they're essentially jamming our mitochondria. And in good light, that's not too much of a problem. You have light to make up for certain enzymatic processes, basically. So light can sort of improve the thermodynamics of your metabolism. Okay, so again, when you're in sunlight and you're exposing your skin, it provides you with extra power, so to speak, and it makes up for things that deuterium it makes up for inside the food that you consume. But it's not all doom and gloom. Deuterium is not a bad thing. But when you eat the deuterium, when you don't have that light environment in place, and it's not on your skin or it's not there because of the wintertime, it can be a bit of a problem, especially for your gut, which gets slammed by this deuterium in the food, buried in the carbon or hydrocarbon chains, basically. And it basically shuts down your metabolism. It basically causes a bottleneck. The difference between the deuterium and the protium, again, on paper, they're the same thing, but on the biophysics level, one's got a nucleus in it, and that creates double the mass, basically, compared to the protium. And that requires double the energy to move. And if you haven't got the energy there, or the light, or the thermodynamics there, it's basically creating an inflammatory response, basically. And that would be, quote unquote, with time, like leaky gut or inducing intestinal permeability. And that is leading towards endotoxins, and that's leading towards cell danger response. That's leading along the lines of hormonal responses. But again, you lose the cell cycle. Your gut goes AWOL. Your immune system goes AWOL. Your energetics goes AWOL. Your brain, nervous system goes AWOL. Then it hits the skin, blah, blah, blah. A whole other thing, more and more
Cascade
and
of
more.
events.
Yeah, basically. But again, that in theory, deuterium is not a problem. It comes in seasonally if you're living in nature, if you're living like you should be living. But again, our modern diets is filled with it, with the seed oils, fried foods, pulverized grains. And again, it comes at a problem. Again, bodybuilders typically have a high deuterium diet, but they sort of offset it with building muscle. That's where the deuterium goes, because again, it swells. It's causing me more free radicals for the muscles to actually grow and get healthier and get stressed from. But like bodybuilders will be using it in that certain way. Your everyday person wouldn't be. Your everyday person, their gut would be slammed from it, and it would be basically inducing metabolic syndrome and quote unquote going towards like fatty liver issues. So that's the real problem. But again, when you eat a seasonal diet, you're getting the right signals from the food into your biology. It's a bit like there's harmony. There's harmony with the light environment that you're in, meaning you're going outside, you're getting the sun, or you're feeling the cold. You're eating the same food who's doing the same things that you're in, basically. So you're getting a good reflection. There's a relationship going on there. But on modern food, there's no relationship. People in the UK are eating avocados or bananas. And when you eat those foods, again, they're not good or bad. But again, that response to that food is going to be very different. Again, when you eat a banana, you increase your serotonin in your gut. And again, that might not, and again, when you eat it like today, like 2 bananas, you'll be like, so what? I don't feel the difference. There's nothing there. And yeah, maybe so. But you do that consecutively for like a few years, like, and other things in the mix. Yeah, maybe that's a problem, basically. So again, it just breaks, in my opinion, it just breaks common sense to be thinking like people in the UK should be eating religiously bananas. Or, for example, where I live, I should be eating sort of like wild salmon or North Atlantic mackerel. It doesn't make any sense for me to be eating like British beef. It's because again, it's not local. It's not here. It's a different signal that animals been programmed on by the forces of Mother Nature, basically. So it's only transportation that has really allowed us, and logistics to allow us to happen. But you have to only go like back 100 years ago. And again, that was common sense. Eating seasonal local. It's cheaper. It's more effective. It's better for the environment. It cultivates local jobs and opportunities. It keeps the money within the country. It avoids tariffs and all that kind of shenanigans, basically. It avoids emissions from transportation, which is one of the biggest climate offenders. It's not cow farts by any means. So that's the gist of nutritional, like locally. But then we can go and explore, okay, certain foods are there at a certain time of the year to protect my body from the light as well. Or again, maybe there's a reason why nuts, there's an explosion of like root vegetables at like autumn time. And maybe there's a reason why there's like surplus of calories. So again, we can use that as a yardstick. There's a surplus of calories or electrons, and it's actually making me a bit fatter. And that fat is a bit fluff. It's not obesogenic or anything like that or problematic, but it's there, and it's actually going to allow me to be eating less and use it as a fuel source when food becomes more scarce in wintertime. But we've just lost all that sort of ancestral wisdom. It's gone down to complete balance, eating 10 plants a day because Tim Spector says so, because of the microbiome all year round. But again, it makes zero sense, common sense wise. But again, it's not going into the weeds of that food's bad or that food's good. It's looking at like an objective of that person, the actual essence of first principles, and like working around that. But again, it's not to say like you eating avocado is like bad for your health, or you shouldn't. No, again, I don't think If you eat an avocado or some bananas, it's going to be a problem. But again, maybe when you have poor health, when you have poor mitochondria and you have various issues like mold, yeah, maybe it's going to be knocking you for six more. You don't have that adaptation there.
Yeah, I suppose it's ultimately a bit of an evolutionary mismatch, and it also speaks to the idea of working in a fair amount of biochemical individuality to it as well. What do you think about this idea of sort of cycling macronutrients seasonally?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it should naturally be in harmony with the foods within the seasons.
Yeah, sort of going
But
almost more carnivore in the
yeah,
winter, and then sort of increasing your carbohydrate consumption in the summer.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, it makes logical sense, but are you able to do that? Example, you might have gut issues. You do that carnivore approach, but that might be a bit of a red herring because that's so much sulfur, and maybe you got hydrogen sulfide problems. Or again, you go very like more plant based in the summertime. Maybe again that causes more problems. There's more fermentation. There's more FODMAPs. So again, but in theory, it makes sense to be doing it, going with the macronutrients. There should be some ups and downs of that. Even here, there's a wet season, a dry season. The food is very different.
Yeah, I think I was looking at it more from the through the lens of somebody who's maybe in a state of health as a baseline. Do you think that then alters the would that alter your answer then? Should
Yeah,
somebody who
100%. I
yeah
don't think I think balance can be a nemesis. I think it makes us actually weaker. I think there is obviously regulators of our metabolism, AMPK,
mm,
various things where we should actually have that healthy stress of fluxes of carbohydrates, fluxes of fats or protein. It's very important to actually have that and do that when you're at a level of health to do that. And maybe that coincides with you in summertime going for a bulking phase in the gym as well. You go hand in hand, the light to actually build mass, a bit like how a plant builds mass when it's got water and sunlight. That's when it builds its most mass compared to the dry season where there's no rain.
oh that will annoy all the bros. Isn't winter supposed to be bulking season?
Well, there we go. There's the irony of like listening to modern advice. But again, if I was a bodybuilding prep, and I've told a good friend of mine, again, you should put all your contest prep people on stage in the winter time. But the thing is like they do things very artificially anyway. They're playing around with drugs. They're playing around with things. They're blue light toxic as hell. Is that advice actually going to make it problematic to their already artificial, synthetic lives and health? But in essence, if you're doing natural bodybuilding, yeah, I mean that would be the approach to go along.
Now, I think when you sort of augmented something like bodybuilding with that amount of drugs, I don't think sort of
Yeah,
where you throw a few seasonal variables at it at that point, it's
yeah,
sort of you're splitting hairs, aren't you?
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't think you're going to make any when you're like injecting growth hormone and testosterone and who knows what else.
Yeah. Just to carry on with that bit about fat, I'd love to get your thoughts on saturated fat. I mean, obviously, guys like Nick Norwitz and Dave Feldman are really sort of pushing this lean mass hyper-responder sort of idea at the moment. And well, they're spearheading it really.
I mean, I don't think it truly like matters whatsoever. I
Fair
think it's
enough.
the biggest baloney and waste of time that you could spend on like in your health space. Again, just eat local seasonal foods. Again, I don't think you need to be necking butter or coconut oil. But again, I don't think you should be shying away from animal fat. I don't think you should be dressing. I don't think you should be going out your way and adding PUFA onto your food. But again, you can look at healthy animals; they have a decent amount of PUFA on them. So again, I think it's just like it's like in the trenches on stuff that just doesn't really matter because these PhDs are that this is what they study, this is how they get paid, and it's just like complete bullshit. It doesn't really matter. I don't think you really need to give two craps about certain fatty acids or the lengths or the odd chains. Don't think it's really a big deal.
That's interesting. So Do you think the primary driver of some of these more atherosclerotic states is then just the underlying inflammation and maybe not that increased?
Yeah, I mean, the atherosclerotic cardiovascular issues or endothelial issues is all to do with lights and to do with cortisol and glutathione status. So this is all embedded in this thing called the glycocalyx. This is like your spider web inside your vascular system. And this is a major thing. And this goes on the work of the charge in the human body, where we hold water and essentially conduct electricity there, and also in our bones and everything else to regenerate. But I mean, I think it's, yeah, I mean, you don't, when you got this going on, you don't want to be consuming butter. I just think that's just the moronic thing to be doing anyway. No species really just goes out the way to eat like milk fat, basically, anyway, or coconut oil. Again, it's like, where's coconuts grow? Do they grow in the UK? I mean, that answers the question, basically. So the majority of people shouldn't really be consuming coconut oil. But that said, maybe there's clinical insight. Maybe there's someone struggling with some yeast issues. Would I recommend coconut oil or MCT or copric acid? Yeah, as a potential supplement in a short period of time. But again, it wouldn't be their dietary recommendations. But again, when you look at like the healthiest food on the planet, they typically have a unique ratio. And again, there's no doubt that saturated fats burn easier in the body. I won't say they burn easier. In different tissues that have different effects, PUFAs actually burn readily, meaning, but again, it does depend, like, what is the health of the organism? What's the health of the mitochondria? Because again, I know these people don't work with human beings. They don't measure their fatty acids in the red blood cells. I do. And ironically, not a lot of people actually have good omega-6s on their blood tests. So it's actually a properly prevalent deficiency in the majority of my clients, not all of them. And again, that comes from things like borage oil or like unique blackcurrant oil, like primrose oil, these unique sort of fats. And again, it's kind of interesting to like why. But again, maybe there's actually conversion issues of how we elongate and desaturate sort of the primary fats into these unique fats. And again, there's a metabolic flux, there's nutritional effects there with things like zinc and B6 specifically.
For the cofactors.
Yeah, for the cofactors of these enzymes. So again, I think it's maybe more about that. But again, I mean, it's unique. I think that the most important fat that we should aim for the general is, again, seafood, is for the EPA and DHA, ideally not in an oil or a capsule, ideally from real food, which comes packaged with the iodine, the taurine, the selenium, the zinc, B12 and everything else.
Pro-resolving mediators as well.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's actually the whole package. It's a matrix. I think when you dissect and make vitamins and minerals like synthetic, and again, for me, anything synthetic, when you abstract it from a food, it can cause some problems. Because again, things can backfire, especially if you go a bit too extreme and listen to the advice of taking like 4 grams, 3 grams of, I don't know, EPA a day, which again is excessive.
Yeah, one way to give yourself arterial fibrillation. I think Jack Kruse talked about that concept, didn't he? The idea that you shouldn't ingest anything that isn't a what's the word, an already created molecule in your body. So you shouldn't ingest tyrosine. You should just, because you can offset some of the upstream enzymatic processes thereof. I mean, great, you might end up with more dopamine, but you don't know what negative feedback loops you're shutting down or creating as a result. Yeah, it just provides a lot of food for thought, I suppose, just to sort of, that's a bad pun, but the fact that we sort of take in these nutrients in these isolated forms, what ultimately sort of are we doing to our biology downstream?
Yeah, again, I don't think most people generally don't know because they don't test. And again, maybe they actually get some benefits in the short term. They feel good. But again, we work in a network. We don't work on like sort of just like nodes. Again, that's the most important thing, and we need to see it from a systemic viewpoint, not just looking at, okay, cool, maybe I've got some skin issues, let me just take a boatload of collagen. Again, you get more effects by improving your light environment by taking versus than taking a collagen supplement. I actually had that discussion with my co-founder for my meat company today on our meeting. I was like, because he sells a Ancestral supplement company. So again, he uses like liver, organs, oysters, and he puts them into supplements. And again, I think that's a better approach to it. So food-based supplements, but he also sells collagen. And again, I think collagen's okay, but again, you get more beneficial effects by improving your light environment than taking collagen supplements.
I'll take your word on that one. Not because I don't trust you at all, purely because I just don't understand the sort of the whole quantum biology side of it just yet. It makes sense. I just need to sort of learn more about it, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at this. You don't just analogies are great, or just looking at what people do. So yogis, again, they don't take a lot of collagen in because most of them are vegans. Okay, so typically their silica is going to be fairly good. But what do they usually do in the morning?
Uh, Meditate.
Yeah, they do their little yoga practice outside in sunlight, wearing a few bits of clothes, grounding in the sun, like I just said, and then the stretching, being mobile with their body, and they're actually stretching it out, their collagen, their glycocalyx, their connective tissue.
Improving
It's a bit
fascial
like a dog and a
hydration. Yeah.
oh, there we go. It's like a dog and a cat when they wake up. What do? And when you wake up in the morning, you stretch out. Well, why are you stretching out? You're stretching out your connective tissue, and you should be going outside. And then that's basically attracting that sunlight to basically influence all the water or the hydrogen bonding networks within that connective tissue. And then you get that charge, and then cortisol lowers and it zips it back up basically, and that's your charge for the day. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, basically. If you wanted to improve your collagen and connective tissue, that's what you need to be doing. And yeah, maybe as a connection and biohack here, as you do your derma rolling and all this like gouache stuff, and then you do your red light. So you're opening up the connective tissue, you supply it with the light, and then you basically zip it back up again and you hold that charge.
Okay. I'll digest that, but it does make sense. And I suppose I'm always looking for the mechanism because a bear of limited understanding like me, that's sort of.
So I mean, they do it in the morning, and that's when you get a cortisol awakening response. That's when your cortisol should be the highest in the morning. And again, that cortisol is actually active, say 1 to 2, even maybe to 3 hours before you even wake up. It sort of comes up, and it's actually opening up your body. So it's opening up the connective tissue. And then when you go outside, it's ready. It's ready to absorb photons. You got the water there. And then that light hits it. Your cortisol, your stress hormones reduce when it comes into sunlight. Okay. And there's specifics with the type of light. And then that basically zips it up again. So it bonds it. It feels like a zip essentially in the jacket. And it closes it. And you've got that charge in that water buried. So water is the most important capacitor for energy, basically. It's like a battery, holds charge because there's a positive and negative there. Okay, and again, this goes on the work of like Gerard Pollack or Mei Wan Ho. There's a lady called Mei Wan Ho. Again, there's other people in the water space who discuss this.
What do you think, while we're talking about water, this idea of structured water or easy water? I mean, at the cellular level, it makes sense, but drinking structured water,
No, it
is that
makes
going?
no difference.
You don't
I
think?
I don't
Yeah,
think like when you structure your water in a glass, it
yeah.
makes much difference. I think if you drink a juice and I don't know, drink the blood of an animal or eat foods raw, you get more structured water. That's probably more bioactive than like you doing it,
artificially structuring a
yeah,
water
in
fixing.
water, yeah, I think
Yeah,
you'd have to actually get something living in that. And again, water by itself, when it's especially when it's been reverse osmosed, is typically kind of dead.
did yeah. No, I do go back and forth. And I mean, again, at a cell level, it makes sense, but I suppose the question there was just what
Well,
you thought.
the cell level has a magnetic dipole. So there's a magnet around the mitochondria. Each mitochondria has a magnet. You got electricity. So again, it's living. The water in tap or in your filter is, again, it doesn't have that. And again, it's the water which typically that we create from our metabolism.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me back quickly. I wanted to jump back quickly to ask about deuterium again. Do you ever utilize deuterium depleted water with any of your clients? Do you find it has any value, or do you sort of not go that far? Would you maybe just run them on the?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So me personally, I've never tested it.
okay.
I don't think I need to with my health as it is right now. I've recommended it to certain clients. Logistically, those clients, it's been hard for them to get because they don't live in America. Yeah, there's some European distributors or there's sellers in Europe as well. It's not cheap by any means. I don't have enough experience to be recommending it blindly. But again, if you listen to people like Dr. Jack Cruz, it would be one of the top recommendations that they would recommend, opposed to like a cocktail of supplements. Again, it works on first principles. But in theory, studying deuterium, it creates more free radicals at first. It's changing the cell cycle. It's, again, you get at the end like better glutathione activity, which means there's like better hold of hydrogen peroxide.
Better redox state in the body. Um, yeah, mechanistically, that does make sense as well.
But I would say again, like the water never works alone either. So again, it's just you just can't be drinking the deuterium like depleted water and like staring at your computer all day, not being outside. It works again in the system. It works in an integration optimization approach. And again, it's kind of cliche to say this, but it's just how it is.
Yeah, no, you can't really yeah, I mean, I suppose you can try, but you're never going to sort of outrun Mother Nature at the end of the day, are you? We can try and augment what we do with pharmaceuticals, with drugs, as we alluded to earlier, but you are at best patching the system, and it's ultimately going to fail unless you sort of return to these first principles. Um, Ryan, I'd love to sort of maybe take a dive into oral health now. It's again something I know you champion a lot in your Instagram posts, and why it's so important, and maybe why it's you think it's so often overlooked. I think a lot of practitioners, a lot of individuals who are struggling with health conditions. It's one of the things that they look at maybe last, and potentially it's one of the things that they should be looking at first, especially if there's um, an active gut infection or something like that, maybe a candida overgrowth. But could you sort of talk us through your thoughts there, and the way you sort of approach oral health when working with someone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex subject, and by any means, I'm not an expert in this, but it's extremely important. I believe it's actually set up from a very young age, from breastfeeding, from the foods that you eat, from your environment. I do think our modern dental approach is extremely backwards. I'm a big fan of the approach put forward by Mewing, I believe it's Andrew Mew. John Mew. John Mew? It's a Mew.
Yeah, I
But
think one of them's his son.
either way, it's a completely backwards approach. It's a bit like the chicken and the egg. Do you get all bad oral health, or do you acquire it from poor health? So again, Weston A. Price, he used to be a dentist. Well, he was a dentist, and that's actually how he got into the health space about the diet.
I think Jack
He
Truce
went,
was as well, wasn't
yeah,
he?
exactly. He went around the world. He studied indigenous people, and he took photos of them, and they actually all had very good oral health, great jaws, great facial structure. And again, what did he say? Well, they had certain nutrients in their diets: vitamin A, D, E, K. Again, They eat locally, they eat seasonally. But what else did he notice? They were outside as well, but he didn't let that one out the bag. So again, they're all outside, and that is actually having a big role in how your stem cells and your structure, your organization of your tissues is developing. So again, where does that develop? That develops maybe in the womb of mum. So again, maybe this is why we see all the progression of all health issues, but also other health issues is because again, our future generations are just like predisposed to many issues because our health is so poor basically, and we get poor hands from birth essentially. Though chewing, I think chewing is a major signal for the health of your teeth within spacing.
Jaw
But
development,
obviously,
airway health. Yeah.
yeah, and the way we breathe at nighttime, I think mouth taping is a band-aid. I think it's actually the result of poor metabolic health and how your jaw is holding position, and even the fat around your tongue and the airways here as well. So it's not touched upon because again, it's just pushed towards dentists. It's separate from health and from the doctor or health practitioners. It's a separate entity. I think that's the biggest problem, and it's treated separately.
Siloed.
Yeah, and that's when you're going to get institutionalized essentially by just believing the mainstream doctor. Fluoride, you need to be doing this and that. Yes, just use braces, and your teeth should just be all straight, and straightness comes at the expense of basically your structure of your face. So again, a great book really to dive into is called Jaws. Truly eye-opening in terms of understanding the development. But obviously diet and nutrition does have a role in it in terms of like cavitations. But obviously the butchering of amalgams, what we use, like I said, braces, root canals, that's setting us up for major problems essentially. Because again, all our gums have straight access to our blood supply, and where they are located around our trigeminal nerve and everything around that network is extremely close proximity to truly where it matters in our brain. So it can be a big insult and problem, and it gets easily overlooked. Do I think it's like a number one root cause of people's issues? I would probably say no, to be honest with you. It still doesn't change my approach in what we would need to be doing with most clients, but it would be definitely investigated depending on what's going on. For the most part, it would just be improving our oral hygiene, chewing more, using mastic gum, breathing better.
It sort of goes to the mewing approach. Is that correct? With the utilization of
Yeah,
the mastic gum.
yeah, 100%. So you're really improving your what's the word? I'm not a specialist in this in terms of like the muscles involved in it, but again, all these muscles, and even like I've been chewing like 1 hour, 2 hours a day, and I really feel it here in these muscles here in my head. And I think it's like a soft massage basically for your brain. And I do it in my dog. I give him bones to chew on, and I see his head develop. It gets wider. So again, we're the only animals that eat soft food, and soft food is the biggest problem. Throw in a bit of sugar, throw in a bit of fluoride, and poor health, and you're not really going to be regenerating. Yeah, you're not really going to be regenerating that tissue. And again, especially when it comes down to things like vitamin D, nutrient density of like vitamin K2 or microbiome influencing the K2, we become basically a sitting duck to having oral health, and that's going to be a reflection of our health.
Yeah, I think for me, the most interesting part there is potentially the whole airway issue as well. If you sort of partake in these practices where well, not practices, these lifestyle habits where you don't get enough vitamins or fat-soluble vitamins in early on in life, and you go and get that proper jaw development, or if you utilize these things like braces, you end up sort of creating airway issues. You end up with a narrowed, is it maxilla, top part of the jaw. My facial anatomy is terrible, and yeah, you end up with these sort of collapsed sinuses, these collapsed airways, which then result in forward head posture, not being able to nasally breathe, everything you alluded to earlier. So, and that in itself can then sort of drive a lot of systemic disease. I feel so. Yeah, it's again, it just speaks to the fact that ultimately, the more we try and sort of fix what nature's already provided us with, the more we the more issues we create. And I don't know if this is correct, but I think it was Weston A. Price who sort of pointed out that most indigenous populations didn't actually have that much in the way of sort of fractured dentition. There wasn't that much in the way of tooth abnormalities. I think that's again the result of these sort of shrinking jaws as a result of not breastfeeding, not having children breastfed properly, not having that sort of initial input into the development of the jaw. And I think and again, this is just my opinion, definitely not dentist, but that it all plays a role in the 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 latter development of our health as we develop. Um,
100%. Again, I do feel sorry for people because when they go to the alternative viewpoint or functional medicine viewpoint of dentistry, again, they also get knocked for six in terms of like the costing and the approach of that. Because again, even for me, I'm like, that's bloody expensive. Of what I hear some dentists recommend for one of my clients to improve something, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, guys
but
like
again,
I was
it's
just going. Sorry,
it's
go.
it,
Yeah,
it is a specialism. Again, I do meet some. I don't meet, but again, I challenge a lot of these dentists when okay, we need to get you ready for the surgery. You need to be doing detoxes. You need IVs. You need hyperbaric, and I'm like, that's just complete baloney as well. They're just seeing you as a cash cow. Just go in the surgery and go in for the surgery and get it done, and then again, we can sort you out. You don't need all that fancy, fluffy stuff. It's useless. Um,
yeah. I think it's a case of utilizing the right tool for the job too. I think hyperbaric is potentially great in something where you've got a complex mitochondrial issue as a result of maybe something like Lyme. That
well,
is,
again, I mean, again, hyperbaric is extremely complex because in paper it looks really good and it sounds really good, but it can actually be a big problem without you really know. Without you even knowing it, especially if you're not handling iron very well, like most people don't. So it actually creates way more free radicals than it really should do on paper, because again, it is a free radical stimulator. But again, for most people, it's actually like a kick in the teeth of a free radical stimulator, basically.
yeah, and I think that's where it's definitely got to be understood. I mean, it's going to upset the redox balance of the cell, and you're going to sort of, and I mean, that's you're creating more ROS, aren't you? I mean, that's the byproduct of oxidative phosphorylation, is the is the production of these reactive oxygen species. So if you're throwing more oxygen at the mix, then unnecessarily, just to sort of defend my viewpoint, then I think it can be an issue, which is where it has to be utilized with the practitioner like such as yourself who understands its value when it has to be used. I think that's where a lot of these tools do become problematic, is that everyone and their aunt who feels like they're biohack, and I apologize, I hate that term, just utilizes them indiscriminately without thinking potentially of the downstream consequences. But definitely useful tools, but they've got to be utilized at the correct time and for the correct reason. I suppose, like everything.
100%.
Yeah. So I know we've been here a while, and I don't want to take up your whole day and keep you out of the sun indefinitely. But I'd love to sort of just sort of pivot once more, make one more pivot, and then maybe we can sort of chat about some testing and then do a few rapid fire questions. But your thoughts on this idea of limbic system training, limbic system overactivation. I mean, it does take us back to the CDR side of things as well to an extent. But yeah, the idea that a lot of people will be caught up in this state where their limbic systems, sort of the fear center of the brain, or one of them, is overactive, and then that drives a lot of cortisol release, a lot of these inflammatory immune processes in the body, and that you can then sort of offset these practices with the use of various programs like, I think the Gupta method's one, and I think there's another,
DNRS,
DNRS, Trimor-Plus.
TRE.
Yeah, TRE is I do think, and I think, yeah,
Yeah.
TRE I think is a bit of an outlier, but or maybe it's not. But what do you think about these practices in general?
Yeah, I mean, this does depend on the person. For someone who's got robust health, I think it's probably a waste of time. They don't need it. But those who are having issues for a long period of time, and maybe they have pre-existing trauma or had trauma from a early childhood, their processing of their emotions it is really underpowered and not supported, basically. So they become stuck. The nervous system is not responding as it should be, and they require an extreme delicate approach, be it with nutrition, be it with lifestyle. And again, it's all about supplying security and safety for these people, and small steps, so small wins. And again, maybe that's slowly chipping away at toxicities, overloading with them, opening up pathways, again, getting that charge back inside their cell, like we're talking about with the metabolism, circadian biology, all that kind of stuff. And again, getting their batteries working again, because again, quite like first principles is their battery's flat. When you do add charge into the battery, it goes out straight away. Potentially, they've got a lot of mitochondria to clean up and to get rid of. So their starting point is extremely low, low, low. And again, these type of clients take a long period of time. The practices, again, I think they're very, very good. Everyone has more of a, people have different preference for different ones. I'm more a fan of like all water-based stuff. So float tanks, being by rivers, sea, grounding more, sound baths, because that's still sort of like energy coming into the body. All these safety sort of stuff, basically recapitulating how you were in your womb, in your mum, which was probably like the most safest place to be ever in your existence, because it's safe. You're surrounded by water. Your mum's obviously doing the best to protect you. It's dark. It's quiet. That's the safest place to be. And again, there's no surprise when people are going through trauma, they basically go into that same position they were in the womb, essentially.
Yeah, that sort of fetal position.
Yeah,
Um,
but again, I
mhm.
think it's made worse by our modern environment, where again we can't express ourselves, which like how we want to go. Again, if we want to be angry, we can't be angry anymore. Or again, if we want to express aggression, like raising our voice or like throwing something, we can't do that now. I think that's very important as our species, is sort of making us reprimanded, or men not being able to cry, or whatever it is. I think that's the real issue as well, of our maybe family, parent behavior, sibling rivalry, all that kind of stuff laced into the mix as well. But again, it's definitely real. For some people, it's more of a concern. For others, it's not really something to be thinking about. But I do think TRE is very good. It brings back principles of like wild animals and then shaking, where they're done with like a stressful situation. Humans have sort of forgot about that. Um, so again, I do like that.
Could we dive a bit more into that? I know it was purely, I asked because you're one of the few people I've chatted to who actually knows that off the bat. I think it was put together mainly by David Baselli. But for the listeners, could you just maybe describe what TRE is and maybe why it's so potentially effective and useful?
It's abbreviated as trauma release exercises. So this is a number of exercises which gets you into a position where your psoas muscle, which stretches upon your upper to your lower body, which connects it, holds tension and trauma. And the exercises prior to this exercise allows you to be able to shake out the trauma and process it. So you're sort of in a meditative state. Maybe do this like 1-to-1, or maybe do this in a group session, which I've done many times before on my journey. And you sort of let your body go anywhere it wants to go with freedom. and some things happen, some things don't. Your body just starts shaking. Again, you feel lighter afterwards. But the whole process is your psoas muscle becomes tighter, and it's that feeling of like you're going curled up basically. So you're opening that up again, not literally stretching it out, but you're bringing in the activity, the blood flow, and you're making it more supple and mobile again. And again, that has an effect, the psoas muscle, on your diaphragm, when you're breathing, and that obviously underpins your vagus nerve and everything else. So again, I think it's very nurturing. Some people don't like to do it because, again, it can be a bit weird, or they have a bit, again, it's a bit more vulnerable, putting yourself in a bit of a vulnerable position. But again, it's definitely worth exploring. And just looking at one of the YouTubes online that he has doing a tutorial and just seeing what happens. It might take 1 or 2 free sessions to go there, to feel it. But again, your body should start shaking. And again, you don't have to put anything behind it, just to see where it takes you.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a valuable tool. I think some of these vagal nerve stimulation devices are also useful. I don't know if they have the same amount of efficacy.
Well, the thing with them is they're very placid, meaning there's no buy-in. It doesn't get you to do anything. So again, you're static. With TRE, you're actually, there's an act of doing something. So there's a buy-in. With stimulators, I've had a few clients saying like, this is a wonderful with a stimulator, and I've been surprised by that. But again, I'm more for like doing things. Again, if you feel pent up, angry, frustrated, trapped, again, exercise is going to be wonderful. Using your breath and exercise, higher reps. Again, I've got a good friend, a guy called Dr. Ed. He's all into this, using movement as a bit like ayahuasca, of reawakening your body, basically. So it's really interesting understanding that kind of stuff, and different tissue or different muscles hold different tensions and different things to do with your emotions. It's really interesting. Actually, a good guest to get on.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love it if you could put us into contact with them. Speaking of that, what are your thoughts, or what is your experience, I suppose, with maybe manipulating fascia? I know it's maybe a bit off scripted. Have you ever sort of counseled clients on various fascial techniques to help them sort of improve their health, or whether it's sort of these dynamic exercise routines? I think what's the one that springs to mind? Functional patterns, things like that.
Yeah, so I think functional patterns is great, but I think there's a bit of a marketing, and I think it loses senses of the reality with some of the exercises that they do. I think it becomes a bit more complicated than it really should be, uh, and a bit ignorant of themselves. But in principle, I'm a big fan of it, on their beliefs. That does make sense. But again, there's a pattern there. People who do functional movement patterns, they're all pale, they're all desk bound, they all don't have good health, their posture sucks, their facial structure is poor. So again, there's a pattern there. They don't have good health, and obviously their fascia is going to be stripped and their muscles are going to be stripped. They've got a lot of pain. So, like the all health, what comes first? But that said, again, fascia stuff, massages, I think they're very good, but they're only moving around a charge. They're not adding in charge. It's a bit like, what's the word? Acupuncture. So they're not adding anything in. They're just opening up certain channels and
Meridians, pathways, yeah.
exactly. But massages can be really good. For some people, it can tank people out. I used to be a big fan of massages. I probably had like, in one period of my time when I first came to Nicaragua, because massages here are like $20 an hour. I was having like 5 massages a week. Again, this is like when I started noticing my health. Like, it was good, but like getting really good. But like nowadays, I don't really have any massages. I spend my money now, that $20 on plants and stuff like that for my land. But again, I don't think I need them as much now. But at that point in time, it was really beneficial, and just getting that flow in your connective tissue.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that's overlooked, is just the whole, not necessarily just the movement piece, but, and it's something I'm slowly starting to take a bit of a deeper dive into, is the connection between fascial health and mitochondria. And yeah, I think it's and I'm not going to embarrass myself by saying too much more, but yeah, again, that is just overlooking that it should be sort of utilized as part of more people's protocols as a whole. Um, Cool. So I think I'd like to end off really talking about testing. I'm of the opinion that in the functional space, and maybe I've just been sort of led by the thinking of Michael Rousseau, who I know you're familiar with as well, is that testing in the sort of the functional medicine world is for the most part maybe a bit overdone, especially when you sort of look at the way patients or clients present. This idea that you need, as a practitioner, to sort of give people $1,000 worth of tests before even choosing to work with them. I'd love to get your take on this, though. Do you sort of share that philosophy? Do you think that when somebody does present with a complex case, potentially, that you have to sort of run a lot of testing off the bat, or can you just start again reintroducing these basics, and then sort of maybe introduce testing at a later stage when there's a stall or something like that?
Yeah, it definitely does depend on each client that comes through, obviously on their budget, what they want, what they like. Some people like data, some people kind of laid back. Again, obviously, I share my opinion that I'm generally don't need anything to get the ball rolling. But again, if you want, we can do this and this. This would be my recommendation. If you want to see it on paper, definitely helpful. But sometimes it's not really helpful either. So again, it's definitely overrated in my opinion and overhyped. Maybe that's down to how these test companies make their way in their rounds into the educational space in nutritional therapists or nutritionists, as they're the main educators in the health community, basically. So again, you want to learn about, I don't know, Akkermansia in the gut, which is a type of bacteria. Well, again, this stool test company's got a webinar on about this, and then they're going to flog their test that you can measure the Akkermansian species on this test. So again, that's maybe what you're going to be talking about for next month of your content. But again, it's sort of conflicted. And again, it's just unfortunate. It's a bit like conventional medicine. It's very heady. Like, okay, yeah, we can do this test. You take the supplement, that number goes down. We retest again. Great. But again, what's the application of that? Do you really need to do the test to show it and prove it? Again, I'm always on the fence, essentially. What I like to do is get a client in. Maybe they got previous tests, be it blood. That's a starting point. Again, my boarding process is extremely intense. So again, I know the client very well already. And again, that's enough. We improve their health, their baseline, say 40%. And then that would be the turning point in doing test. Because again, it's a bit like you got a pond and the pond's dirty. You can't see the bottom. Well, again, how many fish have we got? Well, we don't know because it's dirty. Well, let's clean the ponds and see how many fish we got. We don't need to do a test and analyze it, essentially. So again, it's always about like seeing more before testing, and then it provides us, whilst we're at a better position or the client's in a better position, to see what's remaining. What can we actually, because again, typically I improve the client's health within the first follow-up, say like 40 to 60%. And then what do we have left? What left is maybe we haven't explored or lurking that we haven't done? Is it this? Is it that? And again, that could be maybe a Dutch test. That could be organic acid test. That could be a stool test, although I rarely do stool tests. But again, that would be the approach, in my opinion. It's not, you don't need an extensive bacteria test because biohacker Bob tells you what. It tells you need to see your biological age in 4 different tests, and Chris Masterjohn's done doing a mitochondrial DNA analysis, or I don't know. There's a new breath test. Again, I think SIBO testing is so overrated. Mycotoxin testing is, again, very complex as well. It's a lot to do with the food. And that's more or less what you do see. But again, it's this difference. You listen to different people's opinions. It becomes complicated. Yeah, there's no easy answer, essentially.
I think we share a fairly similar sentiment there. I think more or less what you do actually is that you should just get people over the initial hump. And I think no matter how convince people are that they're doing the right thing, oftentimes there's still a lot of open ground that they can cover before they even need to think about doing testing. And yeah, when you hit that sort of inevitable, or maybe not inevitable, but if they do hit a store, then you can sort of utilize them to sort of then isolate what's missing, opposed to just using a shotgun approach and wasting people's money and sort of highlighting what's already obvious. Yeah, if you're not eating a great diet, there's no point in doing a 600 pound or whatever it is Genova, uh, yeah, whatever, just
Nutrival
a
or
Nutrival,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
metabolomics to try and identify an issue. Yes, we know there's an issue. Let's get the basics under wraps first. Yeah, no, I was just about to say, I'd love it if we could just run through those questions quickly. So, where do you draw the line of biohacking?
Red light ice baths, maybe deuterium depleted water, supplementation.
Perfect. Thoughts on high dose thiamine therapy?
Can be useful, but when you're talking 1 gram more, questions should be ringing.
Fair enough. Biggest mistake you commonly see when people are trying to reclaim their health?
Them getting in the way of themselves.
What emerging trend in this space are you most excited about?
More retreats in nature, but not overpriced, like wellness shenanigan ones.
Ryan, where can people find you if they want to connect?
Website www.levite.com or social media Levite, or on Twitter or X, Levite UK.
Perfect.
Well, and again, sign up to my newsletter. I do a weekly newsletter. I've also got a burger or meat company in the UK called O Foods, and that's also got an amazing newsletter each week that I write. But essentially, it sells organ mince mixed with liver, heart, kidney, bone marrow, from the best like UK sourced meat going. So again, it's an online service. So again, sign up to those newsletters. Check Oath out. Check my website out. There's quite a lot of information on there. Again, just get in contact if any questions. I try to give you my time.
Perfect. We'll link all of those in the show notes. Ryan, thank you so much. You've been a star. And yeah, look forward to doing it again sometime, maybe.
Awesome. Thank you.